So the fixtures have been released, ladies and gentlemen. What I thought we'd do for today's video is look into each championship club's first 5 games of the season and determine who's got an easy start to the season and whose is looking pretty tricky. Whenever it is fixture release day, you get that feeling that the new season's right around the corner now. If you do go on to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like. Let me know down below how many points do you realistically see yourselves picking up from the first 5 matches. And just before we do hop into anything, a big shout out to our sponsors over at OneFootball. As always, you can find the new OneFootball app in the top line of the description down below. As we are heading into this new season now, OneFootball is a really handy app to have to keep up to date with all the latest transfer news, speculation going on around your club. If you want to look up individual players and their stats from last season, they've got loads of in-depth stuff on there. And as well as that, when the season does get kicked off, you can get live updates to your phone whenever a goal does go in. But without any further ado, let's hop into this one. So starting out with Barnsley, who I'd say aren't looking too bad for their first 5 fixtures here. They've got games against Luton, Reading, Coventry, Middlesbrough and Bristol City. Barnsley especially, it's crucial they get off to a good start this season. They were playing catch up for the whole of last season because of how they started the season. They won the first game against Fulham and then they went on a 16-game winless run. It was an unbelievable escape in the end, but they can't afford to be playing the same game of catch up going into this season, can they? So a good start for Barnsley is important. And I'd actually say they got quite a few winnable games in that first section of the season here, haven't they? Up against Luton on the opening day especially is going to be an interesting one. Then we get to Birmingham, whose first game is up against Brentford, the same as last season actually. That one was at Griffin Park though. Birmingham did win at Griffin Park on the first day of the season last time round. Christian Pedersen with a diving header, the only goal of that game. Brentford were absolutely all over them, but it was a great defensive display from Birmingham. After that, another tough one against Swansea, then their fixtures ease off a little bit. Games against Rotherham, Stoke and then Sheffield Wednesday. Birmingham are an interesting prospect going into this season. I like the fact that they brought Karanka in. They've still got a little bit of recruitment to do before their squad is set for the season, I think. Goalkeeper especially is the one area where they need to look into, but it is for Birmingham those first 2 games which do look tricky. Up next we then got Blackburn, who I would say have got a pretty tough start to the season here on the opening day away at Bournemouth. After that they got Wycombe, Derby, Cardiff and Nottingham Forest, so at least you'd say 4 of those sides probably going for the playoffs this season. So I'll be interested to see how many points Blackburn pick up out of those opening fixtures. I think you can make an argument for wanting to play especially the relegated clubs earlier on the season before they've had any chance to build up any momentum and things like that, where their squad will still be a little bit all over the place. First home game they've got against Wycombe as well, that's going to be a very interesting one. So tough start for Blackburn overall. And speaking of Bournemouth, they've got a relatively decent start to the season, I'd argue, especially compared to some of the others that we've seen so far. So on the opening day against Blackburn, after that against Borough, game against Norwich, which is going to be very interesting to see those two go at each other so early on into the season. Newly promoted Coventry and then a home game against QPR. Like we were mentioning with Bournemouth before though, we don't really know what their squad's going to be looking like come the first day of the season. There's still quite a few unknowns around that team at the moment. I think their fixtures going into October start to get a little bit tougher, but for an opening 5, that's not too bad for Bournemouth there. They definitely got the opportunity to start the season well. After that we then got Brentford, another side who it's going to be crucial get off to a good start this season. A lot of people can make the argument last year that obviously Brentford fell off at the end of the season with the last 3 matches or so, but realistically Brentford were playing catch up for the whole season because of how they started this season. They only won 3 of their first 11 matches, so should they start this season well, gather that momentum early on, you tip them to be in and around the top of the table for the foreseeable future after that then. So looking at their fixtures, opening day against Birmingham, same as last season. They lost that one last time out to a Christian Pedersen header, but certainly for a side like Brentford, I think they'll be looking at the majority of those games and seeing them as quite winnable really. Bristol City have got some interesting games to start out with. Coventry on the opening day can't be taken lightly. After that, a game against Stoke, who I think a lot of people fancy to be a lot stronger this season. But Bristol City are a bit of an unknown this season, aren't they? With the new management crew that's come in. Naki Wells, as I'm recording today's video, has actually scored a hat-trick against a friendly they've got against Cheltenham. He's one player who, if they get the system built right around him, he could be a real asset for them this season. Cardiff have got a relatively decent start to the season. There's definitely a couple sides in there who I fancy to be up and around the top 6, but in a lot of those games from last season, Cardiff really stood up and came through those games quite well. Definitely a side who I think a lot of people are looking at after how well they finished last season, with quite a few other championship clubs going through different transitions of, you know, players coming in and out, new managers coming into the league. Cardiff are one club who I think you know what you're going to get from them. I think they're going to be strong. Coventry's first game back in the Championship sees them go on an away trip to Ashton Gate. Tough way to start the season, but after that I got a couple of decent fixtures. Coventry last season actually started the season out really well, didn't they? They went unbeaten for their first 10 matches. Good start to this season is going to be important, and I think a lot of people are looking at Coventry at the moment as maybe that one side who could be a bit of a surprise package coming up from League One. It's going to be a bit of a new experience for a lot of other Championship clubs as well to obviously be going to St Andrews twice twice this season, with Coventry playing their home games there this season as well. But looking at those first 5 fixtures, there's definitely scope for Coventry to have a decent start there. Derby have got a bit of a mixed bag in there as their start to the season. Their first 3 definitely scope in there to pick up some points against Reading, Luton and Blackburn, who they absolutely battered at home last season, didn't they? 3-0. But after that, then got 2 of the relegated sides to play Norwich and Watford. They actually played Forest really early on into this season as well. Game week 7 is when they go up against Forest, so we get that one out of the way quite soon on at the City ground. With Derby, they were relatively slow starters to last season. This time round, they'll have ambitions of finishing in the top 6, so a good start to them is going to be imperative. Huddersfield's opening 5 fixtures, a tough start for Huddersfield. They've got games against Norwich, Brentford, Forest, Rotherham and Swansea. Quite a few of them, you'd say maybe 4 of them are going to be pushing for the top 6 this season, but obviously Huddersfield have ambitions of their own. I'd actually say playing the relegated clubs from the Premier League early on, you can get a bit of an advantage from that. I know the 3 clubs that were relegated from the Premier League last season all lost the opening day of this season last time round. Huddersfield, Cardiff and Fulham all lost on the opening day last season. Huddersfield will be hoping that that will swing their way this time round as they take on Norwich on the first day. Luton have got an interesting start to the season, their first game being away to Barnsley, but the one that jumps off the page straight away is that one away at Watford. I bet all the Luton fans are a bit gutted though that it's so early on into the season, because fans won't be allowed in the stadiums by then. But the first time these two will be playing each other since 2006. Had fans been able to be in the stadium, I'm sure there would have been a cracking atmosphere for that one as well, but still a really fierce match. They played newly promoted Wycombe fairly early on into the season as well. Luton will be hoping to carry on their momentum from the end of last season. Looking at Middlesbrough's fixtures, tough couple of games to start out with. They play Watford and Bournemouth straight away, although like we mentioned before, possibly a good time to play some of the relegated clubs as they look to reassemble their squads. After that, they've then got games against QPR, Barnsley and Reading, so a few more winnable ones in there. With Middlesbrough, we're still really waiting for them to make a move in the transfer window, aren't we? They've been linked with quite a few players so far, but have ended up going to different clubs. You know, Joe Williams was one lately, Kiefer Moore as well. I'm interested to see where Warnock takes this squad, but the recruitment's definitely one thing they need to get right. Millwall, they've got 2 of the newly promoted sides to play in their first 5 games of the season. They've got games against Rotherham and Wycombe, both away. The home game against Brentford's also one to look into. It was a brilliant performance by Millwall in that fixture last time round as they got through it with all 3 points. On the opening day against Stoke as well. Historically, so far in their last 2 seasons, Stoke haven't started the season great, so that's a decent option for Millwall to get some points on the board. Norwich have got a few tricky games early on in the way, one against Huddersfield, then home against my side, North End, as their first 2. Interestingly enough though, the last time Norwich were promoted, obviously they finished first in the end, they didn't start that season particularly well either. They only won 1 of their first 6 matches, and after that went on a ridiculous run. Ended up storming up the championship and obviously then went on to get promoted. So a start isn't necessarily everything to a season. I think especially with the turnover of how many players Norwich have brought in this season, it may take a bit of time to bed all those new players in. But there's definitely room in those first few matches for them to be picking up some points. I think a lot of people fancy Norwich to be fairly strong this season. They play fellow relegated side Bournemouth and then the game against Derby as well, which will be an interesting one. Nottingham Forest, now after the form they ended last season with, they'll be looking to start afresh in this one. Now, Forest were a really odd team to predict last season. They seem to be one of those sides where whenever I predict them to win, they lost, and whenever I predict them to lose, they'd win. So I don't even know with Forest if this is a good start to the season for them or not. They start out with an away trip to Loftus Road. A tricky place to go to. QPR always a very unpredictable side themselves. After that, a tough game against Cardiff, but like I said, their record last season against the top 6 was fairly decent. Then they got games against Huddersfield, Bristol City and Blackburn. Also worth pointing out as well, Nottingham Forest last game of the season is up against North End at the City ground. Hopefully for both of our sakes, we got something to play for. And speaking of North End, we have got a tough start to the season here. Each of the 5 sides we play against I fancy to be fairly strong next season. You know, even Stoke, who weren't particularly great last season, finished the year really strongly, have already been quite busy with their recruitment. Games against Swansea, Norwich, Stoke, Brentford and Cardiff. There's absolutely no easy games in there for North End, and I'd probably say one of the toughest starts to the season in the Championship there, for the first 5 fixtures at least. You know, you'd expect all of those sides to be in and around the top half of the table next season, and our record against the top half of the table last time round wasn't really great. We need that bit more quality in the final third to be able to get through these sorts of games, so our recruitment between now and then is absolutely crucial. QPR, I don't think have a particularly bad start to the season, definitely some winnable games in there for them. They got Forest in the opening day. Last season at home against Forest, they had a bit of a stinker. Forest walked away with a 4-0 victory, so they'll be hoping not to have a repeat of that one this time round. But newly promoted Coventry to play in there, Sheffield Wednesday, who are going to be starting this season out of -12 points. Very intrigued to see how they start out this season. QPR having recently signed Lyndon Dykes, he'll be looking to hit the ground running with a few goals. I don't think they got a particularly bad start there, QPR. Reading definitely got some tough away fixtures at the start of the season, away to the likes of Derby, Cardiff, even Middlesbrough could be a tough one as well. But looking at at their home fixtures, even past the first 5, they've got quite a few winnable ones early on, you know, against the likes of Barnsley. They play Wycombe early on, Rotherham as well. Reading are another one of those sides who I'm a bit hit and miss on at the moment as to how well I think they'll do coming into this season. Still waiting on them to make any real moves in the transfer market as well. It's a bit of a mixed bag in there, Reading's first opening 5. Rotherham on their return to the Championship don't actually have the worst 5 fixtures there. Definitely some opportunities to get some points on the board. The opening one against Wycombe probably isn't the most glamorous tie for both sides, having played each other last season, but like I say, a good chance for either of them to get off to winning ways. After that, they got games against Millwall, Birmingham, Huddersfield and Norwich, so it could have been a lot worse for Rotherham. I don't think that's the worst start in the world. Now, Sheffield Wednesday probably have the most interesting start to the season, given the context behind them at the moment, with them starting the season out on minus 12 points. Them, more than anyone else, need to get off to a good start to this season. They're playing catch-up from day one, and it's a tough start to the season, you have to say. Away to Cardiff, not easy. Home against Watford, then away to Bristol City. QPR and Birmingham, now 2 games that Wednesday will be looking at as definitely potential opportunities to get something from. Those first 3, though, I'm going to be very interested to see how Wednesday pick themselves up and start this season. You know, 12 points in this league as competitive in the Championship is quite a thing to overturn. They'll also be hoping as well that there will be a fair few other sides that get off to a slow start to this season, and so that 12-point gap doesn't actually get any further. Stoke are one side who know all about getting off to quite a bad start to the season. They've done it in their previous 2 campaigns. They lost against Leeds convincingly a couple of years ago, then against QPR last year, and as all the Stoke fans will know, one defeat leads into another. That bad momentum can snowball, and before you know it, you end up in the relegation zone. So a good start for Stoke this season could set them up for a successful campaign. Up against Millwall away, though, not an easy trip away to the Den. After that, they got Bristol City and Preston, but then start to ease off a little bit with games against Birmingham and then Luton. I think for the majority of Championship fans, to be honest, when they're looking at the opening fixtures, everyone sees it as a pretty tough run because there's no easy games at this level, is there? Then we get to Swansea, who, compared to some of the other sides that we've looked at so far, don't have the worst start to the season. The opening day is away at Deepdale. I'll be keeping a keen eye on that one. Last time we met at Deepdale ended as a 1-1 draw. Scott Sinclair and Ryan Brewster with the goals in that one. Both ourselves and Swansea will have similar ambitions this season, looking to go for the top 6. After our meeting, Swansea have got games against Birmingham, Wycombe, Millwall and Huddersfield, so a bit of a mixed bag once again in there. If you remember back to last season, Swansea were absolutely flying at the start of the season. They just lost their momentum a couple months in. This time round, they'll be looking to go one better than that. Watford, another side who I'd say have got a fairly decent start to the season, actually. Definitely opportunities to get some points on the board and build up a bit of early momentum. The opening day against Middlesbrough, after that against Sheffield Wednesday, who started on minus 12. That derby against Luton is going to be a tasty one. Then against Reading and Derby. Probably one of the more favourable runs that we've seen so far, actually. It's just going to be a question of, do Watford have their squad in order? Over the next few weeks now, they have got their manager in there. I'm interested to see what incomings and outgoings they've got going in there. Doucouré looks like the latest player who's going to be off, but there's still a really strong core in that Watford squad if they do keep them together. And then finishing it off with Wycombe, who are another side who I wouldn't say have the worst start to the season here, actually. Opening day against Rotherham, like I mentioned before, good opportunity for either side to get off to a winning start in that one. Then they got games against Blackburn, Swansea, Luton and Millwall. Definitely a few hurdles along the way, but that's not the worst start in the world for a side like Wycombe. I think home form is going to be very important for them this season. Not too many sides I think will be fancying a trip there, especially with some of the football they played from last season. Very in your face and they put you into uncomfortable situations. I think if you go into a game at Wycombe and you've not got the right mentality, you might end up struggling. But there we have it, guys. There was every Championship club's first opening 5 fixtures. So like I said at the start of the video, I'd like to know from you guys, realistically, how many points do you see yourselves picking up in those first 5 matches? With the fixtures now being out, it does feel like the Championship season is right around the corner. We're into pre-season now. So if you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. Get all your thoughts in the comments down below, and please do subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.